Hi, everybody.
Not yet.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to our 15-part series on the mysteries, initiation into mystery. Today we're on part 7. We'll be looking at the second sorrowful mystery, which is the scourging at the pillar. We've been talking a lot about how to work with the mysteries in your rosary practice, techniques to open them up and really step into that kind of vast bottomless well you can drink from. I recommend going back through the live videos, all of which are available on the website, to think about some of that stuff together. We'll be making some use of those techniques here, which is first to sort of know what the mystery is about, then to know what the legends are around the mystery, and then to bring to it our own intuition and
Are they
imagination.
available on the website or only?
Not the website, I'm sorry, on the Facebook group.
Yeah, eventually we'll figure out a way to get
We
them
will.
onto
And
the website.
that'll be the next
Yeah.
stop. So today we're at a really rough mystery. In some ways, I think we're about really going into the hard stuff, the tough stuff, and we seem to be doing it in the Rosary, and we are also doing it.
In the culture.
Yeah. So this mystery is interestingly described with tremendous brevity in the Gospels.
Yeah, it just says that Jesus was scourged. That's it.
That's it. No Passion of the Christ, no 40-minute looking at that event, merely a mention of it. And I think that's really, first of all, a way to think about this respectfully when people are suffering. Um,
Yeah, it's made a spectacle in starting in late medieval sort of post Reformation Christianity. It's made a spectacle, right? It becomes almost kind of a form of Christian pornography, you
yeah.
know. And it was, of course, the purpose of a lot of those passion plays and things like that, especially in Germany, where it's to inflame hatred of Jews. So that's been misused a great deal.
So we want to try to open it up and think about this mystery. Let's talk about what happens. Jesus had been
Yeah.
arrested. He has been taken in by the Roman Empire, which is a colonial power in Palestine at that
Yep.
time, with
Hmm.
armies everywhere. People are routinely crucified, routinely tortured
Yep.
for nothing. Whole villages are wiped out by
Yeah.
soldiers. I mean,
Yeah. This is institutional power, by the way. This is the same kind of institutional power we see at work today. Okay, these are men who are administering this, or deciding this, or administering it, are all people who are in charge and who are following the letter of the law.
they're following the rules,
Yeah,
and they have rules, and they're enforcing those rules, and they're convinced of their justice and their sense of
yeah,
righteousness. They
yeah.
are suppressing insurrection. They are keeping order,
That's right. Maintaining order.
maintaining order. And
Yeah,
so I think it's important when we enter into the mystery, we talk about being everybody. So we are not just Jesus in this mystery. We're
yeah.
also the soldiers. We're also the bureaucrats who are signing papers and passing this along. And
And the purpose of the scourging, if you go back and you read about Roman practices, especially the practices of Roman oppression against the Jews and other peoples, not just the Jews, you find that they do this in order to break the spirit of the person who has been condemned. So there's a process that they go through, very quote orderly process.
yeah,
They pass the death sentence, and then they scourge them in order to weaken them and completely break their spirit, so that by the time they're displayed before the public, they're already broken.
it, it,
And
it, it, it's
this
a
is
spiritual
it
breaking of the
is
human being. And we've
yeah,
seen this, of course, in slavery,
yeah.
time and again, the horrific.
And the same tool is used. The whip, right, is the tool that's used against slaves and also against people who are crucified.
It goes from the Roman Empire to the Holy Roman Empire to the empire that we live in today. Empire is empire is empire. But let's take a step backwards in this mystery.
Yeah.
And let's think about it a little bigger than Jesus for the moment. We'll come back very specific again, but let's think about the scourging bigger. And if Jesus in the last mystery is in the garden, still in the Garden of Eden, still aware while everyone else is asleep around him that mistakes are going to be made that are going to lead to horrific destruction. Where are we with the scourging?
Yeah. The scourging is, you know, it's a self-inflicted wound, not by Jesus necessarily, but if we think in terms of human beings, right, this scourging is a self-inflicted wound. Once we begin to practice agriculture, what we begin to do to the earth rebounds upon us, and we end up doing to ourselves and to one another. And so, in the same way that we
Can I
scourge
break
the
that down?
land,
Let me break
yeah,
that down for a minute,
yeah,
just to really think about it. Because if we think of the body of Jesus, the child of Jesus, not as a singularity, but as a totality,
yeah,
as life on this planet, the great green life force of this planet,
hmm,
what's happening to that life? Two things happen after the Garden of Eden, and two things happen in all of humanity.
right,
One is agriculture, which
yeah,
is the desire to force the land into straight rows of production.
right.
And in order to do that, you have to create furrows, you have to weed, you literally have to scourge the land.
You do.
You have
That's
to
right.
burn it. You have to pull out the
And
rocks.
burning it is a big part of it,
You have to
clearing of
plow
a
it.
field. Yeah,
You have to plow it. You have to force it to produce. With wild dirt doesn't plow, it builds.
right,
But the scourging is a kind of plowing. And it's also, by the way, the domestication of animals.
right. And the
How do we,
whipping of animals, the breaking of
the
animals.
breaking of the
Yeah,
spirit of the animal.
so that they become docile and compliant.
That's what has to be done.
And it's the same thing that happens with agricultural slavery, which was widely practiced in the ancient world as
It,
well, and even into the modern era.
slavery has its genesis not in racism, but in empire and agriculture. The
Yeah,
moment you start practicing agriculture, hunter gatherer people worked 2 or 3 hours a day max to get all their calories.
yeah.
And they were fine. The rest of the time was for love and culture and art and music and celebration.
I would just like to say on behalf of my people that there were periods of time when you would go out hunting and you could stay out
Yeah.
for a long time,
And we welcomed those
and it
moments
was
as women. We
dangerous
welcomed
work, and
those
it
moments.
wasn't just 2 or 3 hours at a time; it was 2 or 3 days at a
And they
time,
got their little retreat that they needed,
and
a little quiet
it was
time.
actually kind of fun.
Right.
So,
And okay, so there's this hunter gatherer lifestyle. And then there's this kind of mind experiment that goes on where, and it's hard to know what instigated it. I mean, there have been a lot of theories about what instigates. I think it's more one of those things that it's a gradual mistake. You see people called the Natufian people who start routinely collecting grain from the same places,
yeah,
and they eat the grain and they collect it from the same places, and the seed falls and they return to
right,
those places, and then they think, hey, we can collect the grain and we can plant the grain,
right,
then we got more grain, then we're never going to be hungry. And one of the things that happens when you ultimately get monocrops, I always say, monoculture gives way to monotheism, gives way to Monsanto. It's a kind of,
it's an inexorable, inevitable sort of process that once you set this in motion, you end up for one thing oppressing not only the land but also women as well.
women in a hunter-gatherer society are kept less fertile by their lifestyle.
Yeah,
You really, you got enough body fat for the baby you're nursing, the baby you're carrying, and that's it.
yeah.
And you're not going to be in this kind of state of enforced fertility. What happens with agriculture on a steady diet of carbohydrates is women become fertile all the time. They need to produce more children. They have less autonomy over their bodies.
Well, they don't, in principle, need to produce more women, but they inevitably end up producing more because they're fertile all year round,
More
and
children.
also more children, and also because now suddenly you have these large scale agricultural enterprises that require tremendous amounts of human labor. And so, like a
Yeah.
family that used to be able to just travel around and, with a few other families in small bands and meet all of their needs, now a family has to have a lot of children. Like a peasant working a plot of land, for instance, during the early Middle Ages to a subsistence farming, they had to have enough children to work that land in order to feed themselves. It wasn't
But it
easy.
becomes a self-replicating
It
problem. You have
does.
more children, then you need to feed those children, so you
Yeah.
need more land. So then you need to go out and you need to steal land from somebody else. So you need war, you need armories, you need slavery,
And once you
the
have large,
whole
and
McGillicuddy.
once you have large scale population density like that, you end up with plagues. You end up with well, you're living in close contact with domesticated animals,
So you have your first,
so
I mean,
you
the
have your
close
first
contact with
illnesses.
domesticated illnesses is where we are today. That's what happens. Your monocrops create starvation. Um, when you're living in a permaculture, one plant fails and you eat into
Yeah,
something else.
yeah.
It's not
There's very little. There's very little reason to believe that there were, except during extraordinary events like volcanic super eruptions and things
ice
like that,
ages.
or ice ages. There, where people adapted very slowly to those. But there's no reason to believe that there were widespread famines like people experienced beginning in the early modern age.
You find less evidence of violence.
Yeah.
You find less evidence of starvation. People lived longer. I mean, one of the great myths of the hunter gatherer lifestyle is that people died sort of short, brutish lives. More children died. That's true. But if you lived past age 5, you were as likely to live into your 70s as you are today.
Yeah.
And you were living on a diet that kept your teeth healthier, your body
Mm-hmm.
healthier
Mm-hmm.
than when you were living on
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrates.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the scourging, because right now we're in a very political moment, and we are seeing the singularity that reveals the totality, which is what I think Jesus does for us. Jesus wakes us up to the heart. He's been trying to wake us up to this with his teaching, and then he wakes us up to it
Mm.
in his dying. And he said, this is what empire does. It crushes
Mm.
us.
Jesus basically has two teachings. He has his ecological teaching and he has a sociological teaching. His ecological teaching, you see in the Sermon on the Mount, you see it in the symbols that he speaks with, you see it in the things that actually happen to him, the sort of the mythic details of the story as being born and placed in a manger, which is a food trough for animals. That's a symbol that whatever eats is also eaten and is part of a greater whole.
And I will add, my favorite, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these.
Yeah.
Therefore ask not, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear withal? Take no thought of the morrow. He's advising us to live like hunter gatherers.
My wife doesn't like, trot out the scriptures a lot, but she knows scripture.
I
You
do.
hear that?
But this is the Yeshua I love. This is the shamanic rabbi
Yeah,
Yeshua.
yeah,
And this is who gets crushed. And this is going to be
yeah.
destroyed.
So the sociological reality is empire. And his teaching, Jesus teaches a great deal about empire. If you read through the Gospels, you'll see that he comments a lot on it, and he decides a lot of things. Like at one point, someone comes up to him and hands him a coin, and he says, or no, I asked him, do we owe tribute to Caesar, right? Like, should we pay our taxes, basically? And he says, hand me a coin. And he looks at the coin. He says, whose face is on this coin? He says, Caesar's face. He says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Right? He lives in, for the most part, in a moneyless society. We hear very little about exchanges of money, tremendous amounts about hospitality. And they're even doing hunting and gathering. They're fishing. They're taking food directly from the land. Right?
and, and one of the great sins, the first sin of human beings is the absence of hospitality, the absence of generosity. Hoarding is a sin among
Yeah.
hunter gatherer people. The idea that you would want to keep something for yourself and not want to share it.
Right.
We see the potluck in the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Like, we just bring everything together and share it.
Yeah.
Why not? And and yet Jesus is crushed by empire. And I think one of the things we're seeing in this moment with George Floyd is that here is a singularity. Here is one man who is being killed and destroyed. And we've seen these pictures of him held by his mother, held by the Madonna. His last words are mama,
Mm.
mama. And that it is an awakening for a lot of people to the oppression of empire.
Right. And so the sorrowful mysteries, which take place, I think we mentioned this before, but they take place in an accelerated time frame. like the joyful mysteries take place over a period of 12 years, right? And then the glorious mysteries take place over a period of time that's probably even longer than that, because it basically goes from the time of the resurrection until the death of Mary, who dies at either 63 or 72, depending on who you believe. And so, but this set of mysteries takes place in one 24-hour period,
24
and
hours.
it's inexorable. One thing leads to another. These are the cogs in a machine works. The cogs, the wheels turn, and things just happen one after another.
I think one of the things that we have to begin to ask, and I think the great
This is what Maureen is talking about. She talks about the structural aspect of oppression. Yeah, it's that structure that holds everything in
empire
place.
is the structure.
Yeah,
And whether that empire and hierarchy
yeah,
and the need to enforce orthodoxy and conformity, how do we free ourselves from empire? It's an addiction.
yeah.
It is how do we get back to the garden?
And a lot of it has to do with scale and size. When I sometimes will have conversations with, I don't know, with priests or by professional religious people about Way of the Rose and what we do. Sometimes happen. I'll get in conversations with people like that. And the way I explain it is that we're very, very small. Now, there may be a lot of us, like, our group has 6,000 and growing, and it'll probably get quite a lot bigger than that. But if you think about it, like our rosary circles, our face-to-face meetings, which hopefully will resume someday, but our phone meetings, our Zoom meetings, this exists on a very small scale. We can get to know one another, we can support one another, we can listen to one another's prayers and support those. It,
We're
th-
not doing empire
we're
building
not doing
here.
empire building here.
No
Yeah,
empire building. And empire building is priest and property.
yeah,
It's building up our stuff, getting everybody to follow our rules.
yeah,
It's levels.
right.
It's, I'm going to attain my mastery. And it's one of the horrors is to see people get sucked into empire. I mean, one of the
Well, and
great
it
tra-
always becomes, the idea that church and state can be separate is really a modern invention. They've never been separate,
they're both
ever.
empire.
They're both empire.
They're both empire. And
Yeah,
it's finally the city is empire. Can we save our cities? Can we reform the city? How do we leave the city?
yeah,
Because the city, when Jesus goes to Jerusalem, Jerusalem destroys him.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's our whole species. When we go to the city as a species, we destroy ourselves.
right. It really all starts with cities, and if you look at the oldest myths, they almost always involve the oldest heroic myths. I'll change that. So the creation stories are different, but the oldest myths like Gilgamesh and things like that, they're all about building cities, right? And even Genesis, where does it end up? It ends up with big cities, right?
Big
That's what they're.
cities.
It starts off with a man and a woman, and it ends with the creation of the world's first big cities.
Oh, is there anything good in empire? Well, this is Penny's question, and it becomes a really radical thing. Modern conveniences. Let's take a look at cars. Cars seemed like a great idea. Did you know that the cities were filled with excrement from horses? And it was an enormous problem for cities, was
Yeah,
how much excrement was generated by horses.
yeah,
And so the invention of cars seemed like a genius idea, quick travel
yeah,
and getting rid of this pollution problem.
yeah.
Oh my God, we've solved the
The pollution
pollution
problem.
problem. All right, we solved it. We've got the car and it runs on gas and it's so clean. Well, look at what cities have done. Look at what
Right,
cars have done to
right,
us.
right.
Look at highways, asphalt. If you want to talk about the scourging of our planet, look at our asphalt on Our
Mm,
Lady. Look at what we've done. We burned her body with asphalt. You want to
yeah,
talk about scourging?
yeah. That's
Every
true.
road is a
I never thought about
scourging.
that.
It's
It
a
really is.
scourging of her
Yeah.
body. And we
Yeah.
say that the car has that been a good thing for us? Has the car been a good thing
Well,
for our families,
ultimate,
our communities, our
ultimately
tribes?
not. Yeah, ultimately not so much. But here's the thing about empire, and I think it's actually that's actually quite a good question,
It is.
and because it's the nature of empire to solve problems. And so every solved problem feels like a phenomenal relief to the human beings living at the time it's solved. And this started 10, 12,000 years ago. The first problem was, they had just survived an ice age when they created agriculture. And there was a phenomenal sense that uh, if we could only solve the food problem, which we struggled with throughout the ice age, right? It's a very difficult time to find food. Then we would be in good shape. So they solved the food problem, right? But in solving the food problem, they ended up with a population problem. And so every solution leads to further and further levels of complexity, which then becomes eventually you end up with a structure that's so complex that all it can do is collapse. And this has happened again and again and again throughout history.
Collapse by Jared Diamond is a wonderful,
Yeah.
cheerful book to read.
The difference now is that we are seeing simultaneously worldwide the effects of empire all at once as a species, and so we're about to enter a period of species-wide collapse.
I mistrust the
Yeah,
solutions of empire.
yeah,
I mean, you can look at solar panels and wind turbines. They
yeah.
seem like the solution,
Right.
and yet they involve rare earth mining that is
Yeah,
both horrific to the earth and
and
horrific to the human beings who are basically enslaved to do that rare earth mining.
yeah,
Our Lady has
yeah,
another solution.
yeah.
Sit still.
But just going back for just one last second to that idea of these
Mm,
problems, which each solution brings forth a
yeah.
new set of problems, and these problems they become so many, and the whole network becomes so complex that the only way it can finally resolve itself is through collapse. And this is what always happens over and over and over again. The only place where we don't see this, any kind of widespread, complete collapse, absent an asteroid strike or a super eruption, right, or an ice age, and even those may be part of the planetary rhythm of life, right, over long periods of time. We don't see it in nature. If Our
No.
Lady is managing things, if she is feeding the animals on a plot of land using what ecologists call solar carrying capacity, which is the amount of energy that the sun provides every year, then people can live in a way that's fairly simple and pretty reliable.
And the scourging is a terrible, terrible mystery, and it's about the sufferings of the body.
Hmm.
What's always struck me is how much suffering our modern life has brought to the body.
Yeah.
I mean, people go to your local mall. Do people's bodies look healthy and happy? Fed on the American diet, do people look like they're thriving? Then look at some people from the last hunter-gatherer tribes in the Amazon.
Well, nobody's going to malls,
I know.
hopefully,
But
but
what I'm
I know
saying
what you
is
mean.
we are scourging our
Yeah.
bodies. We no longer experience our bodies as one with the body of the earth.
Yeah.
And it's we have created almost it's a kind of mind control experiment
Yeah.
where we believe our own advertising slogans that life is
Right.
getting better and better.
Right.
What would we do without antibiotics?
And in reality, it's one self-inflicted wound after another, over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The soldiers are us, and we
yeah,
are scourging ourselves.
right,
And it's one of the real challenges when you're reading the mysteries is to be every character, to not just be Jesus. And I think it's the kind of grotesque pornography of like one should allow oneself to be scourged, one should be a martyr, one should create self-inflicted
right,
suffering. That's part of the disease of empire.
right,
It's trying to get people to submit to suffering,
right,
and to imagine that suffering is good for us.
right. And the way empire works is it works through imagination, and
Yeah.
it works by convincing us through the use of symbols and language and all kinds of what sociologists call psychotropic mechanisms to convince us, to convince our body, like our hormonal system, that we're going to be punished, so that we avoid punishment by behaving in a certain sort of way. We end up getting manipulated and herded en masse into certain kinds of behavior. You talk about a mall, right? Mall is a sort of godforsaken place. Like, how do we ever get the idea that you would want to spend any time at all inside of a mall. Well, through advertising, through all kinds of like subtle coercions, starting about the mid 20th century, this idea got rooted in people's minds. And suddenly there were massive amounts of people working in malls under fluorescent lights, just
Kate Bella brings
endless.
up an interesting point. She says solving and fixing problems isn't in harmony with Our Lady's way.
Yeah.
And it isn't. I mean, but one of the things, and I realize my favorite book is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer.
Mm.
And one of the really optimistic things in that book is she looks at how human beings at their best in hunter-gatherer societies collaborate with nature.
Yeah.
In fact, the whole point of that book is that by picking the sweetgrass, this sacred plant,
Yeah.
they actually allow it to
Yeah.
thrive. And if
That.
it's not being picked,
Yeah.
it doesn't thrive. The plants like to be picked. It's just like the plants like to be eaten, and then they like, they want to spread their seeds. They want to
Yeah.
be used. There are plants offering themselves as healers. There are plants, our area is inundated with Japanese knotweed, which is the cure for Lyme disease. So it's a very
Mm.
nature's solution. Our Lady wants to collaborate with us.
Yeah.
What would collaboration look like? Not imposing our own fantasy of empire, but
Right.
collaborating
Right.
with her and regreening the earth.
That was the word I was thinking about too. Collaborating in response to Kate's comment, but solving and fixing problems isn't in harmony with the feminine way. It's collaborative and it's conversational,
Yeah.
right? Like there is a way in which there's a way of solving problems that that feels creative. Think about it. If you have a problem and you solve the problem, you're still kind of stuck in the problem, right?
Mhm.
Whereas there's something very open about collaboration and conversation. Many things could happen, right? You
Our
might
Lady
not
never does
just,
just one thing. She solves tons of
that's right,
problems.
that's right.
Yeah.
And it's our very linear, goal oriented sort of way of solving problems that gives us that kind of tunnel vision whereby we solve one problem and create several more problems. Like insecticides, perfect example. There was a thing called the Green Revolution. It's not what you think. The Green Revolution was the revolution in pesticides and fertilizers in the mid 20th century, that chemical fertilizers, petro fertilizers that allowed food production to boom all over the world.
And that's
That was
like
the
burning the
Green
and
Revolution.
it's about burning the planet with acid. It's the
That's right.
scourging again. I want
That's
to come
right.
back to the scourging one
Yeah.
more time because I sometimes have a fantasy. I mean, Jesus's mother is outside the gates. Mary Magdalene is outside the gates. They probably can hear his cries
Hmm.
and they can't do anything. How do they get him out?
Can't get in there.
They
Yeah.
can't get in there. What do we do as mothers? And this finally is what Our Lady's invitation is, to be a mother. First of all, I got to know the problem. Any empire building, any, is going to create this problem again and again and again.
Right.
Whether those solar panels look like the right way, it's collaborating. Our Lady has shown us. She said, hold her hand, listen to our hearts. The first thing we have to learn to grow is the joy in our own hearts. She has said she's planted a seed there that if we can cultivate it, will lead us to what we need
Mm.
to know and do. And I'll tell you, it's true.
It is. And it's
It's
really it's
true.
really our only protection against empire. It really is. And if you go back to those earliest myths, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden are portrayed as being joyful, right? They're
Joyous.
tremendously joyous.
And that's what we've lost, is
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah.
How do we find the joy again that isn't based on your credit score, your bank account,
Yeah.
where you have enough?
Yeah.
There's enough food, there's enough healing, there's enough love that we don't have to be hurting each other anymore.
That's right.
That's finally it. And finally, it's deeper than racism, it's deeper than misogyny.
Yeah.
Empire is what builds racism,
Yeah.
empire is what builds misogyny. Empire is the tower that needs to fall.
Yeah. All
Tune in
right.
next week when we'll be doing the crown of thorns. Looks like it's going to be a.
Yeah. Well,
But Our Lady, we don't turn away from sorrow. We
no.
don't have to because we have a joy within us that allows us to bear witness with
Right.
our mother and to rescue our children from this violence, which is
Right.
our job. We will. We're going to do it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Bye bye.
Bye.